Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zelinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zelinskas, your podcast host. Today we're talking about recruiting. Specifically, when is it time for you to engage a recruiter? What are some of the benefits of using a recruiter? And how can you spot a good recruiter? In order to do that, we have Casey Hasten. She is the Director of Recruiting and Coaching with VIP, podcast host of the We Are VIP podcast, and the Networking Ninja. After being in the accounting world for over 20 years, she made the leap to recruiting those with similar backgrounds. It is her goal to help others find their career passion using all the skills and networking outlets she has gathered. Today, her mission is to help raise the consciousness of the world by helping those she touches learn to be at choice. To accomplish this mission, she focuses on the importance of mindset first and foremost, and teaches her clients how to live at choice and how to co-create their own reality through managing perceptions. So stay tuned for this conversation that is about recruiting. Hey, Casey, thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited for our conversation finally. So Casey, I wanted to start with one question. When do you think is the best time for someone to engage a recruiter when they're searching for a job?
That is a really good question. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so proud of you for launching this podcast and following your dream and your passion. That's amazing. I love to see people doing that. But, when it comes to recruiting and when to engage with a recruiter, and interestingly enough, I just had this question over LinkedIn from someone that had heard me on the radio. And so I think the time to engage with a recruiter is as soon as you graduate with your degree. You want to start building that relationship from the very beginning so that you can trust that person, so that you can learn to know, like, and trust them. I have, relationships with my candidates that go back years to the beginning of my recruiting phase. In fact, I just engaged with one of my candidates that I've just kept in touch with. I placed him back in 2014. Okay. Yeah. That's when I first placed him. And he was like a senior accountant level then. Right. But I've kept in touch with him all these years just to see how he was doing. And he's kept in touch with me and kept that relationship going. Well, during the pandemic, he ended up opening a restaurant during the pandemic. Who does that? I know, but he did very well with it. But he took a year off from accounting, which is what I do. I do accounting and finance. But randomly, I called him a week ago and he was like, I said, I know you're not wanting to look. You're real busy with the restaurant. He's like, actually, the restaurant's running great and I'm pretty bored. I actually was just thinking about giving you a call to stick my toe back in the water to see what was out there. And I was like, funny, because I may have the perfect role for you, which does not happen very often, right? Timing's everything, but it's rarely that good. And I kid you not, from a week ago to today, he's accepted an offer with that company. But wow. If we hadn't had that relationship, if we hadn't been working together for so long, I wouldn't have known to call him just to check on him, right? He wouldn't have known to trust me because this is a startup company. Right. And the company wouldn't have known that he was a great candidate because I had known him for so long. There's so many moving parts there, but the sooner you can engage with a recruiter that you like and that you trust, the better. That's my opinion.
I actually think that is such a great strategy because, like you said, when you have that long standing relationship, then you are able to trust each other and you know that you can support or that you can count on him, if him or her, once you place them, that they're not going to let you down. So I think that relationship that's a perfect answer. So I think that that's great. So obviously you are a recruiter. How long have you been in recruiting? And I think the real question that I want to ask is, what is the status of recruiting in this day and age?
So, and I'm going to clarify on the status part, but I've been recruiting for almost 10 years.
Okay.
So obviously this is not my first career.
Right.
But I, from the time I first started to the where I am today, my style has changed dramatically. But I will tell you the one thing that was very interesting when I started recruiting was that, and maybe it's because it was a second career and I was a little bit later in life, that I didn't want to be put in a box with other recruiters. I didn't want to do it the same way as everybody else. And I had to do some things the same way until I proved myself. But once I proved myself, my manager at the time, she was like, you know what, you do you. You do it however you want to do it because whatever you're doing is working, And so I have a very different approach when I work with candidates. I don't work with a ton of candidates at any given time because I want to be able to make sure that I'm paying attention to those candidates that I'm engaged with and giving them my full attention. And at this point, I work mostly off referrals. Okay. So, but that's the beauty of building a network, right? You don't do that from day one as a brand new recruiter.
Right.
So as far as the status of recruiting today, I mean, are you talking about, is it a hot job? Is it something somebody? Okay. Absolutely. It's a hot job. And especially for those that are very entrepreneurial, this is a perfect job to get into. But I would encourage you to do it only if you have a love for people, because I feel like what separates a bad recruiter from a good recruiter is that love for people. If you have a recruiter that's only in it for the money, because you can make a lot of money recruiting, right? But in order to do that, it means you sometimes have to sacrifice your candidates. And what I mean by that is you may hold back some of the information about the company that you may know, and put them in a position where they're going to hate their life because the job's horrible. Okay. So if you have that entrepreneurial spirit where, yeah, you want to make money, we all want to make a living, but you still care enough about the people that you're not going to put them in a bad situation, then I think that's, where the true superstars rise.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, because if you start sacrificing the benefit of the candidate, then you're kind of holding them back, whether it's, for whatever detail, whether it's salary or the type of job or whatever.
Or work-life balance.
Or
that's
work-life balance. Yes. So I totally agree with you. So kudos to you, Casey. I know you're a quality individual. We've had conversations before, and I know you're a person that I feel honored, that I can trust you. So if anybody's looking for a recruiter, Casey is your person, because she really does give the candidate that attention. And like she just said, she doesn't sacrifice the candidates for her own personal well-being, which I think is fantastic. Now,
can I tell you a funny story real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So I had this one, and this is still talked about to this day, right? I had this one client that I found out later about the work-life balance, which was horrible. And I found out later about the toxic work environment. Like literally the manager would get so mad at people that when he would talk to them, he would spit on them. Have you ever had a manager like that where they're just so mad they can't even control their spit? So I fired him, and they came back to me and they're like, no, Casey, you know what we want. We need you to help us. I'm like, I'm not placing people out there. And they're like, okay, we'll pay you this fee. And they gave me an exorbitant fee. It was ridiculous. And I was like, fine. Here's what I'm going to do though. I am going to be completely honest with them. And the other thing was they had about a year churn. They were turning people over after a year. Okay. But they were paying very, very well for those people. Okay. And so I told him, I said, I will do this, but I am going to tell every candidate that they're going to hate their life, that they're only going to make it for a year, and that they're probably going to get spit on. Are you okay with that? And they were like, not really. And I'm like, then I'm not doing it. And they're like, fine, do what you got to do. Just get us some candidates. And I did. And it used to make my coworkers so mad because they would send me candidates. And I'm like, I have to talk to every candidate before I submit them. And I would have that conversation. I'm like, they're going to pay you very well, but you're going to work. You're not going to have any kind of work-life balance. I had one guy that didn't even get to go to the birth of his kid.
Oh,
you're not going to, you're going to be gone in a year. That's a guarantee. and there's a possibility of showers. And I still had people willing to go, and I placed a lot of people out there, but you know what? They went in it with their eyes wide open.
Yeah. And I think that's a big difference. If you know what to expect, then you can make it work because you're prepared. So absolutely. Okay. So now the other side of the recruiting status, why would someone hire a recruiter? Like, what are some of the benefits of recruiting, again, in this day and age with the pandemic and the Great Resignation that is kind of winding down? So where do we stand there?
So, and I'm assuming you're talking about companies, why they would want to hire a recruiter. Well, even though the Great Resignation seems to be winding down a little bit, it's still going on, right? Our candidates right now have a shelf life of about 48 to 72 hours before they get multiple job offers.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. And so the benefits of hiring a recruiter there's so many reasons, right? Number one, we're going to reduce that time to getting that butt in the seat for you, which is going to save you money. That's really where our fee comes in. But the other reason that you want us is because we are in constant contact with the candidates. Whereas if you're bringing candidates in on your own, you're not having those heart-to-heart conversations with them to see where they're at in the process, to see who else they're interviewing with, to, talk to them constantly about money, because that can be a real issue, and to find out what their concerns are, right? I just had a client that came to me, and they were brand new to using a recruiter. And they came in with a low ball offer. And I'd already, because one of the conversations I have with the candidates is I'm like, do you want the job? Give me rated on a scale from 1 to 10. If it's anything less than an 8, I'm going to start digging. What is it? People don't typically accept a job if they rank it less than an 8. But then I'm going to close them down on money. And we close down hard. I need to know what your bottom dollar is. If I get an offer less than this number, do you even want to hear it? Or I will say, give me your bottom dollar, and if I get a number less than that, you'll never know you had an offer. Okay. And so recently I had a client come to me, and I mean, really, they love the candidate, but companies want to save money, and this is not the time to do it, not in this economy. And they came in 10,000 under what he told me his low number was. And I'm like, that's not going to do it. And they're like, well, just give it to him and see what he says. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I've already closed him down. I know what his bottom dollar is. For me to bring anything lower than that would be an insult, and it's going to start this entire relationship off on a bad foot. So either meet at least his bottom dollar, or let's go find you another candidate. And they came back and they're like, okay, fine. And so that's a real benefit to having a recruiter on both sides, right? Yes. I saved them starting off a relationship with a bad feeling because he's in there going, what, was I not worth it? That's what I asked for. And, and I saved them from having to start the process over again to find a new candidate.
Yes. Okay. So I really want to talk to you now. This is a little bit of a tangent conversation, but women don't negotiate as often as men do. So and I know that you're working for the company, but do you do coaching to the candidates, or is that something that's out of your realm because you're working for the company? How does that work?
That's a really good question, because it's a balancing act, of course, because, we want our candidates' best interest at heart. Okay.
Yes.
But at the same time, we're paid on a percentage, right? So the more the candidate gets, the more we get. But of course, we don't want to push that and seem like we're like used car salesmen with our clients, but we definitely want to keep our candidates happy. So it's very much, we have to make sure that we are communicating with both of them. So when you're working with a recruiter, the recruiter does all your negotiating for you. So that's another benefit of having a recruiter. Okay. And just like in that instance I just gave you, I'm talking to the candidate, and like, if their salary expectations are way out of whack, we're going to have that conversation. That's a coaching conversation. And I have those constantly. If they're too low, I'm going to have those conversations too. But I typically have a range for them that we can expect to fall within, and the same with the company. And then when it gets down to the nitty gritty, I mean, if candidates heard some of the conversations I have to have with clients on their behalf, they would be like, so glad you got this, because it can get pretty hairy sometimes, and I have to be pretty, just like that one conversation, I have to say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not good enough.
Wow.
So but I think even though it is the client that pays us, we don't have a chance of getting that money if we don't have the candidates.
Right. Right.
So we have to have both parties, and we have to keep both parties happy.
That's fantastic. And I love the fact that you're advocating still for the candidate, even though you're, again, working for the company. Because now, have you heard of the whole pay transparency thing that's happening now? There's like 17 different states in the United States that have these pay transparency laws. Some states are required to have the pay range for the jobs listed. Other states will give the pay range if requested. So is that something that you delve into state by state, or is that something that, you're not, how does that work?
So I am not familiar with the pay transparency law. So obviously that doesn't apply to Texas.
Right.
But I will tell you, I will not go into a role or into a search with a company without a pay range because I need to know.
Right.
But I also will not advertise that pay range. Like when I post a job or when I'm talking to a candidate, my common response, and it's not because I'm trying to be evasive or anything like that, but I will say the salary range or the salary is within your range. And I do that because if you give somebody a range from 160 to 180,000 and they're only a $160,000 candidate, but they see that they could have got 180,000, they're going to want that.
You're right.
And I have to manage those expectations, right?
Mhm.
So I just, I let them kind of drive that bus and tell me what salary range they're looking for. If it's outside the range that I have available, then I'll be like, okay, that's too much. And then we can have that conversation. But I don't ever want somebody to think they're going to get the top of the range just because it's the top of the range.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's perfectly understandable because, I mean, it might be experience, it might be skills, it could be a number of things, but yeah, that the pay transparency laws, I'm excited about that because that's going to help us get rid of the pay gap, right? Eventually, if all states go to that. Right now, like I said, there's about 17 states, and that to me is exciting because it will help women get into the same ranges as men. So for various reasons.
Well, I'm curious though. I know another, and I don't know if this is part of that same act or not, but I know there are several states that have made it illegal to ask someone what they were making in a prior role.
Oh, yeah.
And I totally support that.
Yes.
I totally support that because the problem I run into with clients now is this whole 10% mentality, and they're thinking, okay, well, you were making this before, so we're going to give you a 10% bump. You should be happy, even if you're still way under market.
Yes.
And so I feel like if that job is worth whatever that pay range is, I don't care if my person was making 30% less.
Agreed.
Obviously, they're underpaid.
Agreed.
So
Yeah,
I really hope that moves across the entire US sometime soon.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Okay, so negotiating salary is always something difficult for people to do, specifically for women. Are there, and you obviously are negotiating for some of your candidates on their behalf. Can you tell me like one or two key phrases that you use with the companies to advocate for these folks as far as trying to get them into the range that they want?
Let me see, because I think every conversation is so unique when it comes to negotiations. I'm not sure that I have like a go-to phrase or anything, but a lot of the times, and the way that I negotiate is really different than the way you would as an individual, right?
Okay.
Because I have a different vantage point that I can negotiate from.
Got it.
And the fact that I know what the company can pay already, I know what the candidate's expecting. But I would say for someone that's negotiating, especially a woman, number one, don't be afraid to ask. You've got to ask. And my favorite line that one of my mentors gave me was get your ask in gear. Okay. And you need to know in your mind what that tipping point is. If they come in below such a number, you got to be okay with walking away.
Yeah.
Because if you don't walk away, you're going to go in with a bad taste in your mouth from the very beginning. And that's not going to be a very fruitful relationship or career, more than likely. But also when you do ask for that number, have that number in your head ahead of time. Be confident. Don't say, well, maybe I should be making this much.
Yeah.
No, be like, I understand that you're coming in at 145,000, but I do believe that my skill set, deserves a minimum of 150,000 a year.
Oh, I like how you said that, just so matter of fact. One of the things
Mhm.
that I've been telling people is you have to articulate your worth with massive confidence and conviction. And you just did that, Casey. So it's like,
Well, thank
so,
you.
they say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So I think that
Yes.
was a perfect example of what you just did.
I think that is so important. Probably the confidence when and have the confidence within yourself. Don't just pretend. You know that you're worth it. You're worth just as much as anybody else out there that is in that same role. So you should be fairly compensated.
That's awesome. I totally agree with that. Now, do you work with just companies or do you work with individual candidates that come to you?
So I do both. And when we talk about working with companies, there's two sides of what I do. I run what's called a full desk. Okay. So I run the client side, which is the company that pays us. They're the ones looking for the talent. But then I run the candidate side, which are the people that are looking for the job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So from a client side, a company side, I'm always working with the companies, right? I'm not working, they don't come to me to say, hey, help my people find work. That's totally different
Right.
type of recruiting.
Right.
They come to me to say, hey, I've got holes in my
Sure.
organizational chart. Help me fill them. And then I will go out and look. And sometimes they'll say, hey, we really want somebody from that company,
Got
you
it.
know, and they will point me in the right direction, although not that as often as I would like. But then I'll work with individuals, and I find my individuals that I work with through a variety of methods. I do post jobs on LinkedIn, but let me tell you something. You know how many people I've placed that have applied to my LinkedIn jobs? Goose egg.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Goose egg. And so it's almost like I do it just because I have to. I put those and it keeps me out in front of people,
Yeah.
when I post those jobs as a recruiter. But rarely, rarely, rarely have I ever gotten a candidate through a job posting. So my go-to is I do go to LinkedIn, but I use a LinkedIn recruiter, and that way I can filter and search and look for candidates with specific qualities. So here's a tip for people that are looking for a job: boost up your LinkedIn. If you
Mm,
don't have those keywords on there for what I'm looking for, I won't find you.
right. I totally.
And that's, yeah. And if you want recruiters to find you, you better have a very robust LinkedIn. It needs to at least mimic your resume.
Right. I think that's great advice. So people can reach out to you as an individual so
Mhm.
that you can work with them. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know that you also have a podcast. So tell me a little bit about your podcast.
So, oh my gosh, I love doing the podcast, as I'm sure you're love doing yours. It is our company podcast. It's called We Are VIP, and it was really born out of an idea. First of all, I was going to do a podcast myself because I'm a huge networker. I meet so many interesting people and have so many great conversations, and I was like, I need to share this with the world.
Yeah.
Not that they're not talking to people, but why not multiply it,
Sure.
right? And that's a podcast gives you that platform. And so I approached my partners at VIP. And just so you know, I do not own VIP. I am what you call an entrepreneur. So
Okay.
I get to be an entrepreneur with somebody else paying the bills. It's amazing.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
I know it's like the best of both worlds. But so I approached them about doing this podcast, and I was like, look, I just want to let you know I'm going to do it because I know that I'm a reflection on you. I won't embarrass you. But if you don't want me to do it, that's going to be another conversation,
Yeah.
And they were like, no, 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 that's a great idea. In fact, why don't you do it for us and we'll pay for it? And I'm like, bonus,
Yeah, that's even better.
And so we found a studio that we love. We record at Real News PR, which is Jeff Crowley's studio. He's amazing. And yeah, we've been recording, but it was really born out of wanting to give back. And that's one of
Right.
the things I love about VIP so much is that they really support that give back initiative, give value first. Very different recruiting organization from any that I've worked in before. And, you know, we set this up so that we could bring on experts, bring on thought leaders to give tips and tricks and, just insight into finding that better job, or making the job you have better for you now. Really
Yes.
analyze some of those gremlins that you may have in your life. If that bad job keeps following you around, maybe it's not the job.
How about
Maybe we need to do some inner work, right? So that's what the podcast was originated for. We've done 169 episodes. We have had people talk about things from mindset to, and all different kinds of mindset, to body language, which can be important, especially when the pandemic hit, to interviewing by video. The dynamic changes
Yes.
when you're not in person. Just all kinds of great information out there and inspirational stories that will help you lead a better life.
That's all fantastic. And obviously, here on the No Woman Left Behind podcast show, we are primarily targeting women in corporate that are trying to move up that corporate ladder. And some women, may be stuck and they don't know why they're stuck. So I kind of, like you, I started my podcast to be able to help people on a broader scale, because I get asked, different questions as far as career advancement. And I too decided, I'm just going to start giving back. And that's exactly what you and I are doing here today. So thank you again for your time.
Of
Okay,
course.
so tell me, when someone is looking for a recruiter, what are some of the basics that they need to start looking for? Because like you said at the beginning of the show, there are good recruiters and then there are not so good recruiters. So what are some things that people can look for when searching out for a recruiter?
Well, when you're first searching for one, I would look to see how active they are on LinkedIn, because that's going to give you an idea of their engagement with their community.
Okay.
Okay. Not to say that those that aren't active on LinkedIn or any kind of social aren't engaged, but how are they engaged? If they're not giving information back to their community on LinkedIn, right? The next part that I would look at is when you reach out to them on LinkedIn, how do they respond? Okay. Do they respond? Number one. But how do they respond? And now I'm going to put some of the onus back on the candidates too that are looking for a recruiter. Make sure you're targeting a recruiter that can truly help you. If you're in human resources and you reach out to me, I'm going to respond to you because that's the kind of person I am, but I'm not going to be able to help you. I do accounting and finance.
Okay.
So find that recruiter that's in the field that you're looking for, because they're going to be more likely to reach out back out to you. When they do reach out to you, look at their tone, look at their, how quickly they responded to you, because that's how they're going to respond to you when you're doing your job search. And once you do get them on the phone, ask them how often they communicate with, or what their communication style is with their candidates that they're currently involved with. Now, for me, I will tell you straight up, I will call you when I have something for you. I'm not going to call once a week to check in. I'm not a babysitter. That's not what I do. However, if you have questions, if I can help you in any way, you call me.
Got it.
Okay. And then I rarely will you catch me, because my job is to be on the phone, but leave me a message. You have to leave me a message. But if you leave me a message, I promise to return your call within 24 hours. If you do not leave me a message, I consider you spam.
Got it. Okay. So you said that you do accounting and finance. So that means that do all recruiters specialize with a specific type of job, or how does that work?
Most do, just because of the nature of how quickly everything moves. In the past, the main reason for that is because you want to have a pipeline, right? Like if you call me and you say, hey, I need a staff accountant, I want to have 8 staff accountants lined up for you. Not the case right now. That doesn't work like that right now. But in the past, that's why you would want to specialize, is so you could just focus and have that pipeline readily available for when your clients called you.
Okay. And then I'm assuming that you yourself have your own network of recruiters. So if I was in, law, for example, and I come to you looking for another law job, do you have a network of recruiters that you refer people out to?
I do. I don't have people in every industry, but I do have some trusted partners that I will refer people out to. Specifically technology. I've got a really great strategic partner when it comes to technology that I refer people to.
That's awesome. Okay. So I do some volunteering for an organization so I coach executives
Mhm.
And one of the things that we talk about, and you mentioned it earlier, so I wanted to kind of circle back to this, is networking is like the number one way that candidates actually get jobs. And they say like for our results, like 80% of the jobs are
Yeah.
obtained by networking. So you're agreeing with that.
Yeah. I actually heard that number was a little bit higher, 85%.
Okay.
Yeah.
85%. And do you have any good tips for networking? Because I know a lot of people hate networking. It's hard, it's difficult. Like we were talking about earlier, sometimes you go and it's just, you're trying to find a job, but what are some really good tips? And you also said previously, what did you say? Get your ask on.
Get your ask in gear.
Okay, get your ask in gear. So
Yes.
networking and how to perform it well so that it makes an impact.
Yeah, I love this question because networking is huge. And I get this a lot of pushback, people saying, well, I have a job. I don't need a network. I'm like, yeah, what's going to happen when you don't have a job and you
Right.
don't have a network?
Right.
You know, you always need to be pouring into that network, feeding it. And you don't want to be that person that only reaches out to people when you need something.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be there when they need something too. You might be the person today that helps somebody be a part of that 85%, but you may need some help to be part of that 85% next week. We're starting to see layoffs. These big companies are starting to lay off like crazy. So, I mean, if you've already got your network in place, then you're going to have a much easier time finding that next role, and you're going to have a leg up over other people. But here's what I don't like. I don't like people that network just to see what you can do for them.
Mm-hmm.
You should always go in with what I call a go-giver attitude. You want to be the one to give value first with no expectation of anything in return. When you do that, my favorite thing to tell people when I'm training them for a sales team, give value first, the money will follow.
Yeah.
Don't ask for it. That's the one time you don't get your asking gear. You want to give value first. When you give value first and people know that you care, that like, and they can trust you, then that money is going to follow all day long. I belong to an organization called Success North Dallas. And the founder has been running this meeting for 34 years. It's incredible. And he has a phrase that I just absolutely love. Well, it's not a phrase, it's a word. But instead of networking, he calls it net weaving.
Mm-hmm.
When the right people connect for the right reasons at the right time. And you want to feed that network. You want to, you don't want to just show up when you need something. I can't say that enough. You want to make sure that you're constantly pouring into that network, whether it's through a networking organization, whether it's through volunteering, however that looks for you. Find a network to plug into and be all in. Don't just go once a quarter or once every 4 or 5 months. You need to be all in. You need to show them that you care about the people in the room and that you're there to give value.
Yeah. I love that. It's the number one way to really be a human is to serve and give back first. And then, like you said, whatever you're putting on the universe that you're asking for will eventually come your way.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So I know you said you just you have this great network, but are there other networks or any specific networks that you typically recommend, or is this the one that's kind of your go-to?
Well, this is absolutely my go-to for a local network.
Got it.
There
you're
is
in Dallas.
I'm in Dallas. Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you, when I say interviewed, I went to several networking organizations around town that were business networking organizations. All of them charge a fee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Success North Dallas was just so far above, in my opinion, the other organizations that I visited, that this is where I decided to dedicate my time and my money to. And that's where I have found the most value. That's for me. That works for me. There are other organizations around. One that I think is a little different. Well, there's a couple that are a little different. There's one called the Networking Hub that was started by Frank Agan, which I think is very valuable. That one's more for entrepreneurs, though. I think that's more for people that, are looking to get connected with people that can help them, and they can help each other trade services, so to speak. I think it's not probably going to help you find a job.
Right.
Okay. But it's good if you're wanting to be around like-minded people that are creating ideas and doing that kind of stuff. There is another organization, and I've not been that plugged into it. I just learned about it recently, but I really like the founder, called Success Champions.
Okay.
And this one it was only started like 3 or 4 years ago, but it's got 55 chapters across the world already.
Wow.
I know. And so Danny Bovine is the one that started this organization, and he will have small pockets in each area so that people are in the same area, and he'll have somebody there curating the meeting. But they do everything virtually. But then if the cohort chapter or whatever decides they want to meet in person, then they're all in the same area so they can do that.
Okay, got it. And by the way, do you service just Dallas, or do you service companies across the country?
We do service companies across the country. We actually are kind of international now. So,
Oh,
but primarily DFW. Yeah, like one of my main clients is based out of the UK.
okay.
So, and we've got some out of Canada. Most of the time, the reason we're serving people outside of the DFW area is because our clients have other locations.
Yeah. And then
Then
just so
we get
everybody's
introduced.
listening, the DFW is Dallas Fort Worth area in
Sorry.
Texas. So.
It is Dallas Fort Worth.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go back to a couple of things that we talked about. You were saying that you're starting to notice companies starting to lay people off. So how does that pair up with the Great Resignation? Because we said the Great Resignation is kind of winding down. So how do those two pair up right now?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you look at our unemployment right now, which is at, I believe, 3.5% nationwide. We still had, I didn't look at the jobs report this month, but I think it was like 11 million jobs last month. So there's still a bunch of jobs out there. There's still small unemployment. We've got, for every person out there that's looking for a job, there's 2 jobs.
Okay.
Right. But we are starting to see hiring freezes. We're starting to see companies laying off. 7-Eleven's one that just had a massive layoff. I don't know if you heard about that. So 7-Eleven is headquartered here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I believe they laid off 30% of their workforce is what the news said. Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah.
Huge. One of my old candidates was caught in it, but don't worry, I got him a job.
Yeah. Good.
Go networking, right?
So companies are starting to lay off. I know companies are calling people back into the office, and that's has people disgruntled because now we're used to working from home. So, and again, we still have the Great Resignation. So any idea how, what are the trends that we're seeing other than these couple of things that we've already mentioned in just the workforce?
Well, you're absolutely right about companies calling their workforce back to the office, and it is being met with brute resistance. This is not something that the workforce is going to tolerate, at least not 100% in office. Pardon me. I will have people not accept a job that's offering a higher salary because they're 100% in office and take a lower salary that's hybrid or remote. So this is something companies really need to consider, is that, Pandora's box is open.
Yes. Yes.
We know we can work from home.
Yes.
Doesn't mean we want to be there 100% of the time, but I think you're going to have to really consider that hybrid work schedule as part of life going forward. So that's probably the biggest trend that I'm seeing. The other thing that's really come up recently, and I don't know if you've seen this, has been, and we've seen a real mind shift through the pandemic of people. They're like, you know what? I'm not going to work my life away for the man anymore.
Yes.
So have you heard of this new term, quiet quitting?
Yes. Yes, I have.
I am just like, what?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually did a post, and I have a survey on, are you quiet quitting? And so far, there's only been, probably about 50 people that have taken it, but a third of the people are saying that they are quiet quitting. The rest of the people are saying, no, I'm not doing that. So it's very interesting. But
I'm
why don't you
glad.
explain quiet quitting?
Well, quiet quitting is where you're not quitting your job. You're just not putting forth the same amount of effort that you once did. You're just kind of doing the least you can do to get by and not get fired, because you just don't care.
Yeah. But I also heard the term that you're kind of still doing your required duties, but you're not going above and beyond. So it could be a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
But I wish it would be called something different, because that quitting part is really throwing people off. I wish it would be something like, like recovering workaholic, something like that, because the pandemic showed us that there is more to life than just work. And there has to be a recognition from companies that they have to treat the person holistically. It's not like just because they walk in the door or they log on to your, system, they quit being, Rosie or Casey. So
Yeah.
I know that companies or some companies that are more innovative are trying to provide self-care in the way of they're paying, uh, money towards like health care, towards health club, meditation, yoga, stuff like that, because they are starting to see the person holistically, which I think is the best way to go, because then
Yep.
you have those employees really buy into your culture. It's your company culture, right? So I think, like you said, companies really do need to look at, that compromise of that, at least hybrid, because I think people are okay going into the office a couple days a week, but every day it's just too much. It's too much because you give up your cooking time, your working out time, that kind of stuff, time with family.
I love that you said that, because I obviously am a very much a people person, and I would never want to be 100% remote. That when we were shut down during the pandemic, I about went crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, where are my people? But I get so much more done from home. So I do a hybrid schedule because it's my choice. And so I'll work Monday and Fridays from home. But here's the thing. I don't have to drive to the office. I don't have to put on makeup and get all dressed up if don't have any meetings, right? Or if I do, I can do it 5 minutes before.
Right.
And I can walk my own dogs during the day because I'm right here. I don't have to hire somebody to come walk them because I'm too far, to come in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And that brings me joy.
Yes.
And it's a little thing, So I want to be able to, but I still need to be around my people. I need to be around my team. So I do go to the office 3 days a week, but I still have that flexibility. Like you said, I can go throw a load of laundry on while I'm checking emails,
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
and that doesn't mean I'm not working.
Exactly. Because when we were in the office, and when I used to go to the office at least 2 days a week, we were home 3 days before the pandemic. And those 2 days you were able to connect with people. But you know what? You would be in someone's office chatting for maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. So what's the difference if I, throw a load of laundry, or like you said,
Exactly.
walk around my dog, a couple times or whatever, so I think it's the same. And again, for some people it's better because you have joy being in your home and, walking your dogs and stuff like that. So I think that's great. Okay, so I wanted to ask you a couple more questions before we go into the end segment. I wanted to know, what piece of advice would you give to someone that's just starting out as a recruiter? And the reason why I'm asking is because I want recruiters to understand what the dynamic for women in corporate is. So that's why I'm asking the question.
I got a couple of pieces of advice here. Number one, don't pay attention to how well the other team members that have been there for so long are doing, because that's a beatdown. Okay. Don't walk in and expect you're going to bill and put up numbers the same as the experienced recruiters. Okay. Number two, the first year is going to suck. Just get ready for it, because you've got to build your book of business, and you're building from zero, from scratch. And you're going to work harder than anybody else, hopefully, in that office. And you're going to see a third of the results. But it's that compound effect. I just read that book, The Compound Effect, recently. But it's true. That penny that you double every day for 30 days is like worth $10 million, I think, at the end of 31 days. It's the same thing with recruiting. The more you do make your calls, you're going to have to make cold calls. There's no way around it. You got to do it. Okay. Make your calls, bury your head, and just do the activity for that first year. And then that activity will start to compound. And that's when you'll start seeing the results.
Got it. And then at what point does a recruiter niche into, like we talked about the various types of jobs?
Into like the accounting and finance, or I would say from the very beginning.
Okay.
Now, that's not to say you can't switch. We've been very successful. We've got a lady that works with us now that what used to be a legal recruiter. Now she's recruiting for accounting and finance.
Okay.
But you're pretty much always going to niche. It's just, where do you niche? And it doesn't mean you can't move to a different niche.
Got it. All right. Very cool. Well, so I want to ask you one more kind of like personal questions as far as like when do you feel inspired and motivated?
I feel inspired and motivated all the time, but I'm weird. I feel inspired and motivated when I'm helping people, truly when I'm helping people, but outside of others causing that inspiration, I'm most inspired and motivated when I take time for myself for self-care. So whether that's meditating, whether it's reading a book, doing something to improve me personally or professionally, that's when I feel most motivated. That's when I'm like, yes.
That's awesome. Okay. And then I know you have a planner coming out, right?
I do. It's a planner / journal,
Okay.
probably more of a journal. I'm a journal junkie. I think I've told you this in the past,
Yes.
but I was carrying around like, I don't know, 4 or 5 different journals. And I was like, this is crazy. And besides, my back's starting to hurt, And so I went out to the market to try to find a journal that had everything in it that I wanted, and it didn't exist. And so I was like, fine, I'll just create one.
Wow.
So my journal is called Awaken Your Potential.
Oh, I love that name. That's awesome.
And it has 6 different sections in it. It's got mindset, affirmations, efficiency. So that's habit stacking. That's how you get so much stuff done, right? Goal setting, huge. If you're not goal setting, start today. Call me, LinkedIn me, talk to me. Productivity, and then finance, all in one.
Wow. So,
yeah.
So each one, so there's a segment or a section for each one of those in your planner. Okay. Awesome.
Yep. And I've actually got it here. I can show you real quick. So there's the cover. This is my working, so don't worry about all the dirt. Okay. There's the cover, but what I did was it is tabbed. Can you see that?
Oh, nice. I like
each of the sections are tabbed. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's got a good coiled binding on it with a pocket in the back, but it's thick. It's a lot of work. You got to really want to improve to do this.
That's awesome. And I know there's people that love to have, their finance and their goals. So that would be a perfect planner. And I love the Awaken Your Potential title. So that's fantastic. So congratulations. Is it out yet?
It will launch in November.
All right. So a few more months and we're there. Yep. So that's excellent. All right, Casey. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation as far as, what does a recruiter do? Do you have 2 tips for, and I'm more thinking of women in corporate, that if they're unhappy with their work and they want to work with a recruiter, where do they start?
So the best thing I would say, and I'm not going to go straight to the recruiter.
Okay.
And the reason I say this, because I coach women, as I know you do all the time on this. If you're unhappy in your work, hire a coach, because you need to find out if you're truly unhappy in your work, or are you unhappy with yourself, and that's reflected in your work and in your workspace. And again, just a recent client that I had, she was unhappy. She was telling me all the reasons she was unhappy. And I'm like, so why'd you leave your last job? All the same reasons.
Oh.
And what about the job before that? All the same reasons. I'm like, do you see a pattern? And from that point, we really got to start digging in. And I will tell you, I'm very proud that she had those difficult conversations with her current employer and was able to get the promotion that she felt she deserved all along and that she wasn't getting because of the men. And she ended up getting it because she worked through those limiting beliefs and was able to do that. So that would be my first advice: is get a coach, make sure that you're not the problem. But then if you've done everything that you can do to make sure that this is not going to be a good place for you, and you are going to reach out to a recruiter, again, the steps I gave earlier, do that. But make sure when you engage with a recruiter that you have that connection with them. And I think we all know what I mean by connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because a candidate affects a recruiter's for one paycheck, right? This is going to affect you for years potentially.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that person has your best interest at heart.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And I'm absolutely excited that you said get a coach, because there is so much work to do that you can do before you decide to leave your job. And by no means are Casey or I advocating that you just like up and quit your job or anything like that. You
Never.
have to take the proper steps. You have to be prepared. And the other thing, like the example that Casey just said, you must be able to have those difficult conversations with your employer if you are not fulfilled in your job. And I know that once you're fulfilled in your job, your productivity goes up like 12 to 14%, which actually impacts the employer too. So it's absolutely necessary that if you're not feeling fulfilled, there's something missing. Maybe you're not challenged enough. Maybe you're not working on projects, but more than anything, you have to ask for what you need. So that's exactly what Casey said. And I fully support that. So excellent. All right, Casey, any final words of advice?
Let's see. I would just say, be true to yourself. Usually I have way better advice than that. But it's just, really, make a choice. Every day we create our own reality by the choices that we make.
Yes.
Make a choice about what you want your reality to look like. And if you want it to be a victim in your reality, that's fine, because your brain will confirm that for you.
Yep.
But know that you made that choice. So be very conscious with your decision making.
I like that, because, two people can have the exact same life situation, and one of them can react so horribly and they're angry and stuck in that. And the other person says, okay, you and I have heard this phrase all the time. Life is happening for you, not to you. And
yes.
you learn from whatever that situation is, and then you make the best of it. And that's the difference between the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. So
whole nother podcast.
Yeah, whole other podcast. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Casey. Well, this conversation has been awesome. It has been a pleasure to hang out with you. We will have to do this again. But thank you so much for being here on the No Woman Left Behind podcast.
Thanks for having me.
What a great conversation that we just had with Casey Hasten about recruiting. I think one of the things that I want to focus on is I asked her originally, or at the beginning of the podcast, when is it time to make a connection with a recruiter? And she said, as soon as you graduate. And I think that's great advice, because you can keep that relationship going throughout your career. I want to recap Casey's 2 tips. Tip number 1 is, she said, hire a coach because you need to find out if you're truly unhappy with your work, or if instead you need to work on your mindset. Tip number 2 is make sure that you have a connection with a recruiter. You want to make sure that the recruiter has your best interest at heart. I think Casey is a great recruiter because, as she said in the episode, she puts the candidate's best interest at heart. And I think that's very commendable. You will be able to find Casey's contact information on the nowomanleftbehind.com blog. If you're on the Apple Podcast, you can click on the episode website and it will take you straight to the blog. So with that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends, because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.